Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Beasley. I did the readings this week just like everybody else did. And the two things that I took from Kaplan and Lee this week were the the Title IX portion of it, and then the due process, and the process of dismissal and some of the court cases that had to go with that. So the first one that really resonated with me was the Title IX stuff. I work a little bit in Title IX as part of my job in the athletic department, and so it really was interesting to read the law side of it from the book. But the thing that resonated with me the most, and I think the thing that was kind of maybe concerning about it, was the three different definitions that the U.S. Department of Education, the American Association of University Women, and then the National Coalition for Women and Girls in Education. And I thought that was interesting that there were three different definitions, but then I also thought that it was a little concerning that there were three definitions because Title IX is so intricate and can become so convoluted very quickly. And it just was concerning to see that there are three different definitions that can be extracted from and pulled from. And I know personally the one that we always use is the U.S. Department of Education. But if someone ever were to come out and say, well, that's not the definition that we use, you see where the problem occurs. So that's the first one that I thought was interesting. The second takeaway was the due process and for the dismissal for schools, and more specifically, the Board of Curators of the University of Missouri versus Horowitz. So basically, it says that this student was dismissed from the university because she was not meeting the requirements. And so she had great written exams. She was doing what she was supposed to do, but she did not have good in-person skills, bedside manner, working with others. And so they made some accommodations for her to be able to do what she was supposed to graduate, but then the school ultimately decided that they were just going to dismiss her. And this obviously posed a problem because she could not get a job. And the other problem is that the school did not go through the due process. And so they examined all these things about her and gave her notification and everything, but what they did not provide her was an appeals process. And you have to provide an appeals process for any legality in higher ed. I mean, I've even learned that working in the athletic department. You have to give the person that you're almost serving an opportunity to come back and say, well, I don't think this was right, and it goes through an appeals committee, and that didn't happen in this case. So she was allowed to graduate. I think it is so interesting in the due process of almost anything, of like how you get to a certain point, the decisions that are made, but then also making sure that the rights of the person are taken care of. Because at the end of the day, if we're not following the rules and regulations, then nobody is safe. And so I think it's interesting to make sure that we are doing that. So the second part of this is the takeaway from the readings. I read Hornstein's reading of why she really dislikes the accommodations conversation. And I can almost resonate with this too. But her article basically says that she does not like the accommodations conversation with students because it does not allow for students to almost advocate for themselves. So it basically like puts them in a little box and says, here's your issue, here's how you're going to deal with it, and that's how everyone deals with it. And so kids that, may have severe anxiety, it basically, the accommodation process says if student A and student B both have anxiety, they're going to deal with it the same way. So we're going to deal with it the same way. And that's not how it works. And so she says that we as faculty and staff have to find ways to support these fundamental educational goals and find ways to help when needed and encourage skills and resiliency of like, hey, you've got this going on and you've got this learning disability or whatever it is. Here's how to make it here's how to make the most out of your educational experience with it. The problem with the accommodations that she says, and I truly agree with this, is they're overly broad and vague. So you may have a student with dyslexia or a student with anxiety, and you may have to give extended time on a test. Well, you're almost saying, okay, well, that's the same exact thing. Like, you both get extended time, but when really it's not. And then the other is learning what is actually serious. I can't take the test today because I was, the article says I was up, like dealing with a suicidal friend, or is a head cold serious? Like, those conversations have to be figured out with the student. The final thing that it talked about was having students learn how to deal with their problems, because you get these students in this educational setting and you basically, with the accommodation, say, okay, we'll take care of it, when in reality, in the 4 years or 5 years when they get out of school, if you're not encouraging them to deal with it themselves, then they don't know how to deal with it when they get in the workplace. And the unfortunate part about the workplace, no one really cares that you've got these things going on, because I've been told all the time in the workplace, we all have our issues. So that is kind of what she was talking about with that. For the third piece about the learning contract, I actually just submitted my learning contract, and it was actually on Title IX. I interviewed 2 Title IX officers that work at Virginia Military Institute, where I work, and I interviewed the inspector general, so like the number 1 guy, and then one of the assistant Title IX officers as well. And they both have very different backgrounds and bring very different things to the table, very different qualities to the table in regards to how they conduct their investigations, what they kind of bestowed upon me for advice on how to work with students in this setting. So it was very neat, and I was very excited to be able to get to do that as part of my learning contract. So that's all I got for the night. I hope y'all have a great week, and hopefully someone found a little nugget out of what I just talked about and learned something new. Thanks.